All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're at I think our fifth session of the day, and it's been fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and give it a try again. Ideal 21, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility for Learning Conference, which I know for the first four sessions, I keep having trouble saying it's a mouthful, but I am so happy with the turnout. Really, really, I think the content has been wonderful. All the speakers today have been incredible. And I know that for this session with Michelle and Suzanne, it's going to be no different. Suzanne has spoken at TLDC in the past. We had you in another session. I think it was before our accessibility event. You were generous enough to come in and share some stuff about UDL with us. And now her partner in crime, Michelle, is with us today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let the two of them introduce each other for this particular session. It's Reducing Barriers in L&D Through Empathy Mapping and Universal Design for Learning, UDL. So with that, Michelle and Suzanne, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself and let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. So who goes first? This will be our first time introducing one another. So this would be a sport for people to watch.
I will attempt. So first, we're so excited to be here with you all today. We've been really looking forward to this and the conversation that we'll have over the next 45 minutes together. So Suzanne, the amazing Suzanne, she has been an amazing colleague, friend, researcher, and we just continue to get into all kinds of fun trouble together. So Suzanne is an associate professor at the University of North Florida, and she is also the co-director of the Unite Design Lab, which she will talk about in a little bit. And in her former work life, right, and still a little bit, right, you do some interpreting work. So Suzanne has been an interpreter and continues to do that type of work. Let's see, what else can I say about you? She's an amazing mom, friend, colleague, researcher,
No pressure.
on and on. The list goes on, and with a huge passion for UDL and designing learning for all learners. So,
well, all of those and more would be about Michelle, who has been everybody has that person, hopefully, in their work life that sometimes that work friend line, you're in that mode all the time where you're friends and work partners. And I'm lucky to have that in Michelle, who works as a faculty scholar I'm totally cheating, for her Delta Faculty Fellow, because it changed recently. So I want to make sure I get it correct, at the Belk Center at North Carolina State University, whose background has been amazing, who came to our university to help us with our master's in educational technology training and development because of her own expertise on all tiers in education around training and development, where she worked and has taught, and has also worked in industry in a number of places and spaces around training and development. So most of what I know is from her. No, I mean, maybe not all, but a great deal. And when we found out that we had a great connection with UDL, the rest is history. And now we're writing our story through this work, and we continue to share with others. So I hope that does your bio justice. So we enjoy each other. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and hit present, and I think that this is going to work. And then I say that, and we'll see what happens on my end, because I'm the tech person today. So we are excited to share some of our work and interests. It sounds like, and after watching today's presentations, that there's a lot of different interests around inclusion and what that looks like for learning and development, or learning design, training and development. I know all of these are very interchangeable and part of our conversation today. So we have created, if you would like this slide deck, it's out of Canva. You're welcome to it. We had a QR code, so take it, use it. It's a template, and it's yours. And I can also share, at some point, I will share a link as well, so that you can actually just click on the link. But we usually use QR code for accessibility purposes, so that we make sure that we give a version of our presentation to for others to access. So we are part of the Unite Design Lab. This is a plug, not just for us, but because we want to frame it from the work that and the lens that we're working from, that we have created this space to invite learners. We've had some great response from the podcast, from industry experts who are interested in engaging in this work, because we're actually working to develop a train the trainer around these topics. A lot around, I think, some of the themes that I heard this morning about where that sustainable practice comes from, so that you not just create the experience, but you embed the experience and you really root it to the point where it becomes part of your organizational culture and practice and expectation overall. So many probably know what universal design for learning is. It really comes from the PK16 world, but we've really taken it further in terms of looking at it in this space. So I call it the it factor. What is it? And our it factor continuously changes because of the innovative nature behind UDL. Everything from talking about the 3 principles of engagement, representation, and action and expression, we've moved into the and more, we like to call it. And the trajectories you see going up, that the work that's come from the conversations with UDL as the lens, looking at it from and we'll dive a little more into the strategies that we've uncovered and some of the other ones that we promote that are from working in this particular space of a UDL mindset for learning and development. So UDL supports, and we talk about oftentimes that UDL, and I will speak to that here soon, is often associated with accessibility. And of course, yes, very complemented by and supported by accessibility. But there are also really wonderful other spaces and places and individuals to support through applying and looking at this work through a UDL lens. And I'm so excited because I just watched the other presentation. We were talking about representation and imagery, and I thought, oh, well, this is going to be a good segue in this particular group, in this conversation, is here I have one to talk about. And interesting enough, I'll take a sidestep. Someone mentioned in the chat, how do you identify imagery? We collectively use a community and a network of colleagues who are representative of groups that are in our imagery, as a way of passing it through even if it's a conversation, I think was a suggestion by the last presenter, that we aren't the ones necessarily choosing it, but we are passing it along and having conversations about that with other groups that might have a particular point of view for that particular image. So excellent. So that was a little sidestep, and kudos to the last presentation, just because I see the great thread that's throughout all the presentations today and the work and the conversations that we're having. So I feel like I know it's 30 minutes and I want to share so much. I know we both do, and I give Michelle space here too. Michelle, I'm giving all of the good stuff here.
You're doing great.
So we were talking about UDL and accessibility, and to be explicit again, accessibility, if you see here, the common denominator, if you will, is that they're both necessary. So it's not, when we talk about UDL as a lens at looking at this particular work, it's not in lieu of, it's not in replacement of, it's not in the absence of, it's with. And so that accessibility is a component, it is a pillar, it is necessary. And so for us, in our lens, the way that we look at the UDL mindset, or how we're examining UDL in this context, and we'll give you that empathy mapping tool here shortly, where we talk about it in connection with that specifically, is that we're looking at it from a proactive, maybe broader point of view, instead of the individuals who may have a specific need, or individuals. An innovative and applied setting versus maybe a more, oftentimes I find with groups that we participated in, it starts with a legal perspective. And again, both necessary, but how does this frame then create those strategies for inclusion is what we're hoping to dive in as we continue our conversation here today. I'm working in 2 screens, clearly. Here we go. So.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what does UDL look like, right? So we know what it is and how it has these 3 buckets plus the fourth and more that Suzanne and I like to talk about. But what does UDL look like? So Allison Posey from CAST has a great quote that I think about often when I'm trying to just describe about UDL and what is it and what does it look like. And she said that the ultimate goal of UDL is for all learners to become expert learners. So not only do we want them to learn the content of what we're trying to teach them, but we want them to become learners, expert learners, so that they can continue that role, right? So she goes on to say, expert learners are purposeful and motivated. They're resourceful and knowledgeable. They're strategic and goal-directed about learning. And so in today's workplaces and even in our learning spaces in K-12 and in higher education, we really want learners who continually learn, that they're self-directed, right? That they look for ways to stay current or up to date or cutting edge, that they can bring innovation into the workplace, right? And we strive for that continual improvement for ourselves and for the people that we work with, right? That's the ideal employee, right? This continual learner, expert learner, as Allison would say. So in order to have these expectations of these types of learners in our workplaces, we have to provide opportunities for that to happen. We have to provide a space and these opportunities where this type of learning can be happening and not just hoped for or encouraged, right? And so in order for that optimal learning to happen in the workplace, Suzanne and I feel really strongly that UDL can be leveraged in order to reduce those barriers and offering multiple ways for all types of learner strengths, all types of learner challenges, right? Because we don't just have strong learners and challenged learners. We have challenges and strengths within each learner, right? And they're just different. And so in order to offer all of our learners multiple ways to access new knowledge, and then also multiple ways for them to demonstrate new knowledge growth, right? Then we want to apply some of these UDL principles. So this might look like offering like recordings for people to go watch again at their own speed, whether that's faster or slower or a couple of times they need to listen to it. So you can see that it's beyond just different ways to design or assess learning. There's really a mindset that we're talking about, right? So that goes into, right, our next slide. Great, Suzanne. Back to the mindset slide. Yep. There's really a mindset that we're talking about here. So it's a way of thinking about our role and our purpose and what we're trying to do, right? So why do we need to adopt this UDL mindset? Well, we feel really strongly that it's really helpful in capturing and offering opportunities for all of our learners, really meeting them where they're at and taking them as far as they could go, to quote Dallas Herring, one of my favorite educators to talk about. All right, so now we've adopted this UDL mindset. We understand that what UDL is and what it can offer our learners. And so Suzanne and I have a tool that we like to share, which is our empathy map. So empathy mapping is really, in a way, about taking that time to be intentional and purposeful. It's kind of like, it feels to me a little bit like being like that mystery shopper, like, what does it feel like to be a customer here? Or what does it feel like to be a learner in this space, right? What does it feel like to be a learner in going through this workshop or this training or this class or whatever it is that we're designing? So we ask these things specific in these quadrants within this empathy map in order to take that time to really empathize of what that journey feels like as the learner. And that helps us to understand where there might be gaps or where we might need to make adjustments. Suzanne, is there anything you want to add about the empathy map here that is on the screen?
Well, I think that for those of you who've seen it before, we actually did adapt it after reflection, even in terms of who our population is. So one of them was hears. And so we even adapted this particular empathy map so that it said, listens and shares, thinking about the diverse population that might be using this particular tool. So I think that even through the act of applying empathy mapping and universal design for learning, it feeds that iteration of practice of reflecting on and creating changes as a matter of mapping out, if you will, the experiences of, and I use this particular empathy map with teachers. What happened to be teaching, and it was interesting. And I see this in both environments, both in training and development and in education, where the realization of how much design is done, as we know, maybe even from personal experience, from our own perspective and experience, rather than doing it from the point of view of what others may want or need. So it's just one of those great tools that we felt in complement with UDL would help to move that work along, and that thinking and that mindset along. So one of the conversations we have with Louise was that strategies. So we did want to make sure that we had enough time to really talk about what those specific strategies look like, because that's a lot of, I think, when we're part of this work and we're training around this work, we do deep dive into mindset development and values and how that work. I think even Michelle, you probably could agree that a lot of our conversations start with, oh, so we can't just do a 1-hour training on this, can we? We actually need to do this more long-term and iteratively. And we're always excited when that's the realization during the consultation of what kind of work can we offer here that will make systematic change. And I think it goes back to one of the earlier presenters who was talking about the systematic aspect of what we do. Do we do it just because we say we do it for compliance? I've seen a lot of conversation about measuring or assessing compliance versus learning. And so how do we then measure these changes? Well, we make changes as a result of the observations we make partially. And some of those come from, observed observations in our environment. I shared one of our articles that we've written around UDL mindset in the workplace, and action items that relate to physical spaces. They might very much in e-learning spaces. We've talked about all of the spaces in which we live. I would say the last 2 years in particular, that's actually come to life. Even aligning with motivation and providing choice. And so then usually starts the LMS, for those of you who live in an LMS conversation with, but my LMS doesn't let me do that. That's almost probably, wouldn't you say, Michelle, one of our number one, if I can't do that, how do I adapt or make those changes? And I'd love to hear from your perspective, Michelle, on how those choices can be made or provided. Sorry.
For the LMS, do you mean?
Right, like the adaptation of an LMS, or how, when we're designing for our learners who are in those spaces, what does choice maybe look like?
Yeah, so I think that there's always somebody that is within arm's reach, hopefully, that can help you figure out how to embed other tools, like external tools in your LMS, or your LMS might even have functions you don't even know about yet. So asking, but one of the ways is on this slide exactly is this multiple modalities. So offering, video that has closed captioning, that has also a transcript. So there's a lot of challenges that a learner may be having that could be temporary even. So it could be just, that they've had a life event where they needed to go somewhere and now they don't have Wi-Fi or high-speed, Wi-Fi or bandwidth to watch a video, but they might be able to download a document and read the transcript. So it goes beyond so much more than just accessibility. It's really about access. How do they access this content, right? So offering all of those different ways, the video with the closed captioning, with the transcript, is really helpful in making sure that the most amount of learners are able to access that information.
So I think too, it leads us to the representation too in the conversation here, especially around accessible documents. One of the strongest examples are infographics. I would say. And so one of the adaptations from, again, experiences and feedback was that we know that infographics have gained great popularity. However, they're one of the most inaccessible documents used, and in terms of being able to for screen readers, or so oftentimes even color blindness, and we can go down the list. But how one of our adaptations is to create and we've done this in the past in terms of more time and doing demonstrations, taking that infographic and creating a completely text-based version of that document. So that every time we create and use an infographic, that we're actually offering both modes at every single time. And so for us, that UDL mindset is, we're going to use an infographic. We've now trained ourselves to always create that text-based version. So it's not, do we need it? Do we need to ask anybody if we need it? And that goes back to earlier conversations about identification, and then creating systems and spaces where people don't necessarily have to self-identify or have to share their particular needs in a situation. And in fact, a broader audience, we see that growing in terms of their advantages. And even, I think I just saw an article about children who were of the next generation who have a great favorability to closed captioning, often because they believe they're having greater exposure to it. So I think that it's interesting what innovation brings in terms of what might be a design for one might be great for many more, if not all, kind of perspective. And action and expression. So in action expression, we're talking about flexibility and demonstration. Many of you may already be in this space in terms of doing versus watching. So working with subject matter experts, we've seen, there's maybe trainings that are maybe more this particular style versus the action expression, and being able to scaffold that experience ongoing. And so what the UDL mindset is looking at, have we addressed all of these? Have we made space for all of these opportunities? And so what I'll hear sometimes and I might even hear it through the computer is, I don't know that I have time for that. And what we'll say is, a lot of times what we've discovered is there is actually, both in cognitive load and in time, we've seen a great reduction in terms of how people respond, not reduction, but a positive response to how people engage with content and the outcomes as a result of having multiple inputs and opportunities to express themselves. So Michelle, do you want to add to that one?
Sorry, I was talking with everybody in the chat. I got distracted.
I see the same thing, and I want drifted.
So much fun.
I know, and which we were really excited about the nature of the interactive part of it. So I think that we naturally gravitated toward that interactive. So there is a question I'm going to jump to, which, how do you ensure that you're encouraging folks to use the most effective method for the content being taught, while also providing options? I'll give that one to you, Michelle.
Okay, say that one again, because I was reading a different question.
Oh, sorry. This is from Kristen.
Okay.
And she is asking, how do you ensure that you're encouraging folks to use the most effective method for the content being taught, while also providing options?
Yes. So I personally use kind of like an improvement science model mixed with SOTL, so like Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, and where my classroom or my training room, depending on if I have my professor hat on or my trainer hat on, where those become my lab. So I'm constantly checking in with my learners, and then I'm constantly trying to adapt and see where I'm moving needles and where I'm not. And so sometimes you don't want to make too many big changes all at once. If you want to implement some that you're testing. So just keeping that improvement science thing, so you can see where you are making an impact, and where you aren't, it's okay to adjust. So I'll give you an example. I learned about Flipgrid years ago when it was first brand new, and I loved it. So it's a video-based discussion forum. So it branches like a discussion board, but it's videos instead of typing. Well, I went all in for Flipgrid and put it all throughout my online asynchronous training. Well, I found that it worked really well for introductions and creating a sense of community. Didn't work as well for some of the more intricate discussions that needed to have like hyperlinks to resources to understand the background and the context of what was being said. And so perhaps I should have just tried it in one area rather than all throughout, because then I had to quickly adjust as I saw issues happening. So we don't always know ahead of time that what we're going to try is going to work, but just kind of keeping that inspector or researcher eye out looking, and then being willing to be agile.
Really great question.
I can't hear you, Suzanne. I think you got muted.
I'm here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We had some audio issues before, so I got a little nervous there. Excellent. So welcome all kinds of, yes, the closed captioning. There's some great, so I give another example of working with the deaf community. They use a tool. We use a tool called VoiceThread. And I think it just shows how people respond to the inclusive nature of their work. And the campus responded with, we'd like to use this particular tool to the company. And they said, but we can't use it and call it VoiceThread. And they said, great, we'll call it MyThread. So a company who, in response to that question, was willing to make that change so as to serve the greater population, to make the tool seem more, or to be more inclusive. It was already inclusive, but to be more inclusive in its language use. So I say that only because I think too, another example is that, even just the questions and tools and technologies that we're using, how you engage in conversation initially. So often my first question is, so what is your accessibility, either, plan, practice, use, and how do you promote inclusion with your software, your LMS, your technology tool. And I won't go as far as to say I won't use it if they can't express it, but I do encourage even my students to start engaging in those conversations, to ask that question. And that's that proactive, starting from the beginning conversation to say, how do I engage in these spaces if the spaces that have been created themselves aren't actually supportive necessarily of those inclusive experiences. So, yes.
What a great example for a VoiceThread, though, because here's a company, right? They're trying to get their brand out, get their name out. And they're like, it's not about the name, right? It's about the impact. So that was really great.
Yes. Boy, so we went through I think we're at the 30-minute mark, and we were welcome. I think we had the 30 minutes marked for question and answer, and we timed it just perfectly because we're good like that. And we welcome any, Flipgrid is like the family of VoiceThread. Flipgrid is often used through K through 12. And then, and there are some issues similar issues in terms of camera usage. That I created it was interesting. I had my students using audio or video only. And then I had one student say, so we're talking about universal design for learning and choice and flexibility. Why don't we get to use text? And it was a great conversation. So it's fun when the practice that you're promoting then comes back to actually improve your own practice. And so since then have given them all three choices, and allowed for that flexibility, because it was more about my needs than it was about their needs. And now we kind of live harmoniously together. But
Flipgrid has closed captioning, but their button, at least it used to, they could have updated it, but it doesn't have the typical icon for closed captioning. So some people would say, it's not accessibility friendly, but it really is. It does have closed captioning. It's just a different icon that they use. But I usually will let my students or learners use their camera or not, just because of, so many reasons, right? Bandwidth, equity, technology access, all of that good stuff, religious beliefs around videoing and cameras and whatnot. But Flipgrid has been a great tool for creating a sense of belonging and community, because you put a face to the names and you hear tone of voice and you see body language. for those that are using camera.
So we have a question. Any good resource you would recommend for learning more about creating and using empathy maps? Would it be strange if I went and grabbed a book while you're
Oh, yeah.
I do have a book that I'm actually trying to think if I can, let me see if I can find it. It's terrible to do that during a presentation.
You're fine. Now we're in the casual conversation piece, so this is perfectly fine. And there's been some great examples of how you all are using empathy mapping. That's why I was getting distracted, because I was like, oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's wonderful over in the chat.
So it is within voice. So it is, if you look at Gallaudet University's page, you'll see my thread listed. It's within VoiceThread. So you can engage in a conversation with them because they're wonderful about that. They've been very inclusive. Their efforts have been very UDL friendly. So this is the book. I'm going to put the title in. It's Design Thinking Toolbox. I think it's my go-to. Some of you may already know it. And I'll put it in the chat. I'm sure there are probably a lot of others out there in terms of empathy map. We've seen a lot. We've had a lot of great conversations around empathy maps and seen some adaptation, and welcome that as well. Oh, we have some questions. Oh, many questions. Is Flipgrid available for companies to buy and host private instances on their own servers? I believe so. My answer is yes, but I do not work for them.
Microsoft bought Flipgrid. So I think it can do a lot of pretty amazing things now.
So a great question from Chris Wright. What are some strategies to solicit input from others regarding tools, yet avoiding tokenizing or calling out an individual? That is, so that's a really great question, because I would say, as within my own department and my own organization, have had this challenge because we are aware of maybe my colleagues' needs, right? That we're trying to have conversations when we do adopt new technologies without saying such and such needs blank. And I don't know if that's what your question is, but that's our own experience. And I think that for us, because we've gotten into more of a UDL mindset, we've come up with more standardized questions that we ask that kind of address maybe greater needs so as to support broadly rather than individually. So I don't know if that answers that question. Have either of you had any experience with the Docebo LMS and how it enhances DEI? I have not been lucky, but now I'm going to go Google.
Yeah, I have not.
So unfortunately cannot answer that, but I feel like, Rich, I'm going to do some homework and I can follow up and send a message through this probably network here. Loom, have you used Loom with any success to send out learning content replacing learning and marketing? I have thoughts. Your thoughts, Michelle?
I don't have any thoughts to share on Loom. I have used it, but I don't have any.
So Loom, the one experience I have attempted and worked with an organization who was using Loom, and we had a number of challenges when it came to accessibility specifically. And so that has been some time in the last 6 months. And what I'll say with the accessibility race, the way that it is now, I always say check back with a particular tool or software, because there are many of them that are prioritizing for a number of reasons. And so it could very well be that a number of features that they had before may be resolved at this point. And maybe it is an interesting and cool tool. It's similar to VoiceThread, almost like where you get to create something that's dynamic and quick, and then and compressed. So a good question. How do you ensure that you're encouraging folks to use the most? Oh, we saw that one. That was a question from earlier. I believe we answered that one.
Also, I was just going to say, Suzanne, one way to, I'm not sure, Chris, if we answered your question, because I'm thinking, like, are you talking about sharing tool ideas? Like how so we do, I was trying to find an example for you, but where we'll share a Google Sheets with a group of people and have like a crowdsourced document where everyone can add in a tool And then you can have like the bar across the top, like what's the name of the tool, what are the pros, what are the cons to using it, and then everybody shares, and then you can use that resource to go back. I was trying to find one that I could just share with you all that has a bunch of tech tools on it, like Padlet, dot storming, Flipgrid's in there, VoiceThread, all of those. So I was trying to find that, but sometimes you can have a share and tell with tech tools with people over lunch or whatever, and then share them that way.
I'm getting the link for the Design Thinking Toolbox. I think I put the name, but did not get, here's the link for the book. And it looks like Kayleen is doing a great job of collecting all these links that we're sharing in the
Awesome.
spaces, which I love, because this is what, it's funny. I know this is L&D, but this is one of the activities I do with my students who are training and development. And I know one of them is in here. I will not call that person out. Is that I do these repositories for this reason. We do these like collective resource activities where we're talking a particular theme, and I say, hey, go find some great resources that you think match this criteria. Let's put them all in here, and then download this Google Sheet or copy it, because you're going to need it in a year or two from now when somebody says, hey, what about blank? And you say, oh, what was that resource in that workshop that one time? And that's where I appreciate the collection of all of these books and resources in the sharing. I think we have one more question here. Looking down, how do you, oh, no, it's going the wrong way. It goes this way. It goes up, not down. What are some ways we can incorporate the empathy map if an organization already has a needs analysis design document? Michelle, I'm going to give this one to you.
Okay. I finally found the other link though, by the way. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Great,
maybe.
Christine.
Okay. Ask the question again now.
So what are some ways we can incorporate the empathy map if an organization already has a needs analysis design document?
Well, I mean, it's a little, I feel like they're complementary. And I feel like once you've done the needs analysis, so you know what is that gap between what our learners currently know and what they need to know, then we can start filling in the empathy map after that to dig a little bit deeper around what are some of their beliefs, what are some, because change is hard. So sometimes the gap between what they currently know and what we want them to know isn't just because they haven't had the experience of learning it yet. Maybe they're choosing to not take that jump, right? So I think empathy mapping helps us know a little bit deeper about our learners and what they're feeling, how they best learn. So I feel like they're complementary rather than one versus the other. But I haven't seen your company's needs assessment stuff. So it might be needs assessment plus, right? So you might already have that built in.
Sometimes I think the act is mirrored and it just looks different in the format maybe that somebody's created as well. And it's maybe that raised awareness piece that, are we, how are we practicing that and where are we practicing that? Because I don't know that, we love the empathy map, but we think that can be, like to your point, Michelle, represented in a lot of ways. So, I love this response down here too. I love the granular to your specific intervention. For example, if you're proposing an hour workshop, people might be thinking that they're busy, distracted, and comfortable, looking vulnerable. The empathy map has been, such an aha moment for so many of people that I know that are using it. I did a presentation for administrators of distance learning programs, and they went through the process of filling out and completing and discussing, and then I asked for feedback from the group, and one participant raised her hand and said, I care more about my staff than my faculty, and I didn't realize it until now. And she said, and I don't know what to do with that. I said, well, we've only got 30 minutes. All jokes aside, I thought what a great moment for her in the sense of the discovery. And then now was the hard work, right? And that's going back to that sustainable practice, which is, this is only a catalyst for a way of thinking or a mindset to get the conversation started. How that's embedded is much deeper and will require a much longer conversation than 45 minutes today to embed that across an organization and in depth. So, and aha moments are, I have them. I think that to the point of what the work that we're doing is all the changes that we are continuously making. I'm sure there'll be probably one from here. There's from all of our presentations and the work that we do, we find our own ha-ha moments. So we're a part of that loop as well. So we do want to do a big shout out to Nick Tillum, who is part of our team, who has worked with us before, who's not here this go around, who does a lot of work in our Unite Design Lab. We welcome any connections anybody ever want to join us in this work. Feel free to reach out to us. We have all of our information listed. We're always looking for partners and collaboration, and really just to keep the work moving forward. And we're excited to have been a part of this event. Michelle?
Thank you so much. And this chat has been so engaging. I shared an example of a tech tools crowdsourced document that we have used in the past. And so just meant to be an example. And yeah, please connect with us. This has been great. You all have been so engaging, and it's so nice to be in a room, I guess, full of people who have a passion for UDL and for empathy mapping and just for high quality learning. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, you guys. Can you hear me okay? I had to switch computers, so I'm like working on a different thing.
I do. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was fantastic. Chat was wonderful. Thanks. The Q&A was excellent. Presentation. Suzanne and Michelle, really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us. You've just made the event that much richer. It's fantastic to have you as part of Ideal 21.
Well, thank you for the invitation. We appreciate it.
Yeah. So everyone, please connect with Suzanne and Michelle on LinkedIn.
My screen froze a little bit, so I missed anything that was said right before what you just said, Suzanne.
We're good.
I was just saying cool stuff about you. That's all.
Technology.
I know. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close everything out. Thanks again, everybody, for being a part of today. And next one, we've got Milo Dodson from Belkin, Multicultural Excellence. Diversity and inclusion starts with ME, Multicultural Excellence. So, yeah, please join us for that one. I had some conversations with Milo a couple weeks ago, and he's absolutely amazing. Talks about belonging. Really going to be a fantastic one. So, hope to see you there. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Suzanne and Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.